As endless waves of people storm public roads, attack authority figures, or encompass government buildings in protest of their beliefs, there is one common denominator present in the way a majority of revolutions take place across the world. Each has a spark, a trigger, an origin. There is always something that seems to ignite the fire, cause it to rid everything, and then start from scratch, which is actually similar to the mythological phoenix who rapidly goes up in flames, burns, and grows from ashes into a new bird. Whether people within certain societies become discontent because their government does not respond to their needs, is unable to support itself and get help from other nations, or there are scholars and thinkers who have simply given up on the way their economy is operating, people begin to feel restless and helpless. They do not know what to do or where their leaders will be taking them next. When discussing the outcome of any particular revolution, most often an advanced government system, economy, or standard of living are predominant effects. As one analyzes the French, Haitian, and Chinese revolutions, all correspondences should be taken into consideration. First off, the French Revolution was a time of intense economic struggle. It consisted of buckets of bright blood being splattered across the cobblestone streets of France. Heads were being severed left and right, dropping into wicker woven baskets. The poor stayed poor while the rich got richer. The French economy's downfall was like an incurable epidemic. The start of the French Revolution was no doubt the consequence of poor government leadership and a large gap among social classes. There were four main social estates: royalty, clergy, nobility, and peasant. However, this hierarchy was being questioned by the Enlightenment, a movement of intellectuals who questioned many ideas while promoting the use of reason and science. Soon enough, revolutionary concepts began to spread to the commoners. People started to think about rebelling against their monarchy, who during the 1770s was economically broke and decided to raise taxes. Subsequently, resentment had reached its boiling point, and riots began to occur. On July 4, 1789, revolutionists stormed the Bastille fortress, which was a symbol of French royalist power and hierarchy. To this date, that event marks France's Independence Day, as it is considered the beginning of the end of the old monarchy. Shortly after, the French adopted a universal declaration called the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, stating men are born and remain free and equal in rights. This was a profound change in the French government, despite the fact that it only applied to males. It did not give rights to women nor to abolish slavery. The revolution ended in 1799 when a man named Napoleon Bonaparte stepped up to the plate and seized control of the French legislature. Notwithstanding, the revolution started and ended with monarchy, but it had a decisive effect on world history while indirectly promoting other future revolutions. This brings us to the Haitian Revolution. Prior to being an independent state, Haiti was a French colony known as Saint-Domingue. Being slave-based and having sugar, coffee, cocoa, indigo, tobacco, cotton, sisal, as well as some fruit and vegetable industries, it proved to be the most profitable and fastest-growing colony in all of the Americas. In addition, if you do not already know, the French Revolution had a great effect on Saint-Domingue, causing it to split into royalist and revolutionary factions. Those caught in between were of mixed race population, sought to campaign for civil rights. There are three main movements or sub-revolts that caused Haiti to eventually tip over and have a coup. Before getting into the main details of how this happened, one must first look at the island's structure during the late 1700s. Similar to the French Revolution during their revolution, Haiti was also comprised of a class rundown that seemed too good to be true. At the top were the planters, who were wealthy whites that owned many plantations and slaves. Then the petit blancs, that owned a few slaves but were nowhere near as powerful or wealthy as the planters. They were mostly white middle-class workers that held titles such as artisans, shopkeepers, merchants, and teachers. At the bottom of the pecking order were the slaves. Black in race, roughly half of them were children of mulattoes, or Frenchmen enslaved women. The opposing half were ex-slaves who bought their freedom or were released by their masters, known as the people of color. This special group of people was privileged enough to sometimes be wealthier than the petit blancs, and sometimes even the planters. They owned plantations as well as slaves. However, being black themselves, they wanted to draw a clear line between them and their counterparts. In fact, some viewed slaves as their enemies much more than they viewed the whites. But even with this power, they did not have the rights of the citizens of France. Many wished for an independent, pro-slave Saint-Domingue, where they would be free with as many rights as the average French citizen. After all this, you're probably wondering how something could possibly go wrong in such a utopian society. Well, like the 13 colonies of Great Britain came together in unity, later to create the United States, Saint-Domingue was put under a system called exclusif by the French. This meant that the colony had to sell 100% of its exports to France and receive 100% of its imports for France alone. With these absurd limitations, there was bound to be some form of compromise. Saint-Domingueans started to trade contraband with British North America and the British in Jamaica. In the future, as as all of the planters sought to move toward their independence, the people of color toward full citizenship, and the slaves for freedom, eventually all groups became satisfied. On November 18, 1803, General Jean-Jacques Dessalles, a former slave, led the revolutionaries at the Battle of Vertières, which French forces were defeated. On January 1st of the following year, Dessalines declared the nation independent and renamed it Haiti. The nation thus emerged as the first black republic in the world and the second nation in the Western Hemisphere, after the United States, to win its independence from a European power. Above all occurrences in the past, whether it be the French Revolution or Haitian Revolution, there are a few major things present in the way each was started, ended, and what was going on during the actual rebellion. To reiterate, France and Haiti were two countries that struggled to establish a balanced economy. Income gaps were far too large, social classes fought with each other, rather than aiding each other, the standards of living consisted of poor conditions, and natural human rights simply did not exist. When scrutinizing the way these revolutions began, they seemed to have nearly identical issues. On the contrary, these insurgencies also differ in abundance of ways. The primary difference is that the Haitian Revolution became a slave rebellion that changed the Western Hemisphere. Once the mulattoes, freedmen, and slaves thought about the idea of liberty, they decided that they wanted that too. So it was no longer a white versus white revolution, but it became rather white against black and free against slave. To add, there was also varying reasons behind the drive for each revolution. With the French, they aspired to get rid of the old order, trying their best to overthrow a power that they knew had to go. Whereas with the Saint Dominguez, or modern-day Haitians, they fought for self-governance. Essentially, after looking at both of these similar yet equally contrasting occasions on the timeline, I have to come to the conclusion that all revolutions, no matter who starts them, or what started from them, contain the same general DNA factors which construct new civilizations, people, economies, and propositions.
The people of France were growing tired of their poor economy and social system. Their restlessness and poverty turned into anger and revolt. The peasants and middle class could not live in the conditions that they were living in. Furthermore, this resulted in a revolution that would solve the problem. 200 years later, in the 20th century, the Chinese still relied on their old ways of life, but were slowly making their transition into a more industrialized way of living. Cities were being built at a fast pace and factories were popping up all over. Mao Zedong led his Chinese followers to a newer way of life. They were abandoning their old ways for new ones that would soon change China forever. The Great Leap Forward, which took place in 1958, was led by Mao Zedong, the leader of China at the time. He believed that to increase agriculture and industry, both had to grow. Towards the end of 1958, 700 million people were placed into 26,578 communes, which produced steel and growing crops. These two societies are very different, but realized that they needed change, whether it was by the people or the leader. In China, they sought out for a better country as a whole. In Haiti, the slaves came to a conclusion that they needed to revolt to grow. Both of these societies saw something wrong with their way of living and changed that either as a whole or singular group making the change. Overall, China, France, and Haiti all share something in common, that the people were in discontent with how their society was. Whether their living conditions were bad or they lacked certain rights, they made a change throughout time and bettered themselves for the good of mankind.